little bit of technical difficulties, but we should hopefully be good to go. And so, first of all, I'm Doug, real estate agent in Clark, Vancouver, and PDX. And I want to introduce my lending partner, Trevor Bonnet with Guild Mortgage. Is going to be choose the lending space. And so, really, the goal of today's live stream is to answer the questions of the audience. I've also had some questions recently from clients, both buyers and sellers, but a lot of buyers. We're kind of entering a cyclical downturn here. Usually around the holidays, things tend to slow down a little bit as people kind of hunker down. The weather gets a little bit soggier, like we're seeing today, and people are getting into that holiday spirit. And so I think this is really designed to get people who are sort of thinking about 2026 or sooner, and they want to get the information so they can make a great decision. And you want to get ahead of things because it's always better to get the information sooner rather than later. And now is a great time because, like I said, people are getting ready for the new year. They've got Thanksgiving coming up and Christmas or whatever you celebrate. The holiday season is on us, and so let's get all your questions answered. And so I think first of all, I've got a lot of questions from first-time home buyers, and they are wondering. They're kind of sitting on the fence. A lot of people are sitting on the fence. I don't know if you see that, Trevor, but I'm seeing
every day.
Yeah. People are on the fence and they're looking for information, and there's no shortage of information out there.
Yep.
On the internet, on YouTube. The issue is getting the right information and getting information that's helpful to you in making a decision whether it's the right time for you to purchase home. And I think that is you. Is it the right time for you? Because no one on the internet or your mom or Uncle George or the person sitting at the bar is going to be able to answer that question for you. You really need to get that kind of specific information. But having said that, there is some general questions I think we can get answered. And one of them is, do you need 20%? And maybe this would be a good question for you, Trevor.
Yeah.
Do you need 20% down to purchase a home?
Yeah, so this is one that's pretty common. I think comes from, first of all, the answer is no. You absolutely do not need 20% down. Obviously, the more you have for a down payment, the lower your monthly payment will be, or lower options you'll have, or better options you'll have. But that doesn't mean that you should just not try. 20% down, especially in our local Clark County market and the Portland metro area, is kind of unattainable for first-time home buyers. Is mostly what we're seeing here. Quick math, if you want to buy a $400,000 to $500,000 home, I mean, we're talking, you might need 6 figures saved up in the bank just to buy a house. And that alone can be a huge barrier to entry for anybody who wants to buy. The cool thing is that there are so many programs out there for first-time home buyers or even repeat buyers. A lot of people don't realize this, but to be a first-time home buyer, it simply means you haven't had any ownership in a home or real estate for the last 3 years. That's it. So, if something happened, 5 years ago, you fell on hard times, maybe you have a bankruptcy or something along those lines, you still may be eligible to buy a home and qualify for first-time homebuyer programs. The main feature of the first-time homebuyer programs are down payment assistance or low down payment features that help with interest rates, help with mortgage insurance, help with several factors that will make it attainable for you to buy a house. So here at Guild, I always like to say if we don't have the product, it probably doesn't exist. We have I think it's over 600 programs last I checked, but of those, most of the ones we look at are down payment assistance or low down payment because most people just don't have the ability to save. So common ones, 0 down, 3% down, or 3.5% down for FHA are kind of the big three that we're typically seeing. And those ones all vary based off of credit score, income level, assets available. Do you need closing costs covered? Do you not? So really, it's more of a pick your own adventure based off what your finances look like.
Yeah, and I think the good news is that Trevor would be able to look into your specific situation and determine, with that amount of down payment, are you still going to be able to comfortably afford the monthly payment? Because of course, what nobody wants to happen is that, you kind of stretch yourself a little bit too far, and an emergency comes up, and you find it difficult to make your payment. So getting in early and talking to somebody sooner rather than later. I always tell people, like, the minute they think house or I want a house or anything related to house pops in their mind, is to give you a ring, to give me a ring, to get connected with people who are just going to be able to answer your questions. And I know that's what Trevor is really good at, is answering any and all questions. So recently, I had a couple of first-time home buyers with some new construction, and they were able to get into that home for less than 13,000 out of
Yeah.
pocket, and it was a totally affordable mortgage for them. This was a new construction, and so they were able to get some incentives that lowered their payment considerably. As Trevor mentioned, he also has access to some first-time homebuyer programs and ways to get you in for not very much. I've had other first-time homebuyers get in for like under $20,000. So, and I know that, seems like a lot of money, but in the whole scheme of things, it's very attainable for a first-time home buyer to get in home for that price. And these weren't, the home where they put in the $20,000, was like a $500,000 home. It was in a great neighborhood. It was a great home. It wasn't that long ago. And so I think what we're seeing now is, prices have kind of flattened and have come down in a lot of situations. So it's a competitive market right now.
Yeah.
I think it's really a buyer's market currently,
Yeah, I mean
is what I'm seeing.
that's what it feels like. We're definitely seeing a shift where sellers are, maybe people who are selling right now during this time of year. The perception's always been, hey, if they're selling in the fall or winter time, it's because they have to.
Hmm.
Um, and post COVID, some of those industry norms have kind of gone out the window, based off what interest rates are doing. But we're seeing rates kind of stay right now, currently kind of in the low to mid six range for most programs. Some of them are in the high fives right now, but there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. I think Fannie Mae just came out, about a month ago, so it could be completely out of date on their information, but they're projecting, conventional rates to hit 5.9 by, towards the end of next year. And so we're seeing buyers today have a lot more leverage because there aren't a lot of people coming off the fence and looking to write an offer. There still are competitive situations. I have buyers that are competing with maybe one or two other offers, but they're winning them, and they're getting seller concessions, meaning that they can get closing costs covered. I have a client under contract right now. He's utilizing a first time homebuyer program, 3% minimum down, and the seller is covering all of his closing costs plus a rate buy down, meaning his mortgage payment will be permanently lower and it's paid for by the seller. So his out of pocket contribution is minimum 3% down, is all.
Yeah, that you're seeing that quite a lot because homes are sitting on the market longer. I think the average days on market right now is, hovering around high 50s, 60 days on market,
Yeah.
where we would see, like a week,
Right.
back in the COVID boom days. So buyers do have a lot more leverage to negotiate for closing costs, for rate buy downs, for repairs to be made, for a lot of things that they just didn't have before. So I think one of the important things to remember is not to get too stuck on, rates are higher than they were a couple years ago, or, home prices are higher than they used to be. I mean, these are all factors, but I think it's important to remember, like, the cost of getting into the home can be considerably lessened by negotiating for things that we talked about, like rate buy downs, repairs, and contributions towards closing costs. And for our first time home buyers out there, people will be watching, because I had this come up before where I've had buyers and they were like, "What are closing costs?"
Yeah.
And what they were, it's, if you don't know, and
You don't know, yeah.
if you don't know, you don't know. And so maybe if you can give a brief overview of what closing costs are, and so our audience knows a little bit more about what to
Yeah,
expect.
yeah. I mean, that is a very common situation. I have many times a client who call and say, "Hey, I've saved up, $15,000. I have my down payment," and I go, "Great. What are your plans for closing costs?" And there's a long pause, and they go, "What are those?" And that is really why I really want to amplify. You need to start the conversation sooner rather than later, so that you can, figure out your options. In this market today, you don't necessarily need to have money for closing costs. It's never a guarantee. You might lose out on some offers, but sellers are willing to cover them to get their homes pending so that they can move on with their lives and ultimately sell their home. Typically, closing costs are pretty simple. So, depending on what lender you're working with, there's lending fees. Guilds, for example, they're flat. So if you're buying $100,000 home or a $2 million home, they're flat fees. We don't charge different origination, or it's not percentage based. Other than that, it's going to be title and recording fees. And then a very common one is taxes and insurance, or what's called prepaids. And so when you buy a house and your mortgage payment includes your taxes and your insurance, your lender upfront is going to want to collect usually about a year's worth of your homeowner's insurance right up to make sure that next year you have enough money in that escrow account to make your homeowner's insurance. And they're going to do in Washington, they're going to do about 5 to 7 months collection for property tax. The same reason they want to make sure that when that property tax comes due in April and October, you have enough money in there. Typically, I think in this market, prepaids are about 50% to sometimes higher than just the standard title and recording fees, lender fees, and things like that. And then the only other addition would be point buy downs, which is a whole nother topic. And, kind of they make it a little bit more complicated, but essentially you opt or decide to pay a one-time premium fee upfront in your closing costs to permanently lower your interest rate, which my client was able to get the seller to cover. So that is completely optional. That's completely up to you if you want to go that route. And those options, for my clients are always presented, but oftentimes I'll recommend maybe a less expensive option to lower your out-of-pocket upfront, especially if you don't have the means to do that aggressive rate buy down.
Yeah, there's a lot of levers to be pulled to get you into a home that, again, you're going to be able to afford comfortably, and that kind of fits your financial situation. There's a lot of ways to go about that, either through the negotiation side when you purchase, and then, as Trevor mentioned, there's also some ways to make sure that your payment is going to be affordable.
Yeah, I'd say a percentage based, just to kind of keep it simple. Obviously, it varies based off home, loan program, area buying. But I'd say typically, you're gonna if you're going to pay your own closing costs, you need to anticipate 2 to 3% of the sales price on top of your down payment. So if you're doing, and in this market, not necessarily applicable advice, but a year ago, you needed to have money for closing costs in a lot of instances. So buyers who were doing 3% down ultimately needed about 5 to 6% of their purchase price just to make sure that they had enough money to get the deal done.
Right. And just to be clear, we're not saying that the seller is always going to pay your closing costs, but it's certainly, given the market and how kind of flat it's been, they're a lot more open to doing this. And so we're seeing a lot more of these kind of situations. The home appreciation in Clark County has still been pretty good. It's been about 3% overall this year, which is pretty good, considering the national average has been flat, basically flat, or in some markets it's been negative, and it really depends. It's neighborhood specific, it's home specific, and so I think there's a lot of opportunities for first-time home buyers right now, especially in the new construction realm is one I've seen, but also resale. I've seen a lot of good, solid starter homes in safe, convenient neighborhoods, that places where I would buy, and they are in the high fours, hovering around fives. There's a ton of places out there right now. So the inventory has been higher. So there's more homes on the market, which means, obviously there's more sellers. Buyers have more of a selection, which makes it competitive. And then that factors into what we just kind of spoke about, and buyers having more leverage to negotiate things for themselves. But you would never have seen that price of homes in these neighborhoods just a couple of years ago. So we've really seen, and there's been kind of a lag effect, because when interest rates went up at first, the home prices were still high. So it was really tough for buyers. But over the last year, a little bit over a year, prices kind of flatten and come down in certain neighborhoods. So what I've seen is new construction has been good, and the resales where they need a little bit of work. So for the buyer who's willing to do a little bit of their, you are seeing immense bargains out there. I've seen places that are own, cosmetic work, and so it's not for everybody, but for a first-time home buyer who's looking to put in a little work, you can see a lot of what we call forced equity. So when you start doing those upgrades and repairs, your home becomes worth more almost immediately, and so you can see those equity gains that you have control over because you're the one who's spending the money and the time to update, and then you're seeing that return in the form of a home that's worth more. And so I tend to challenge home buyers to look at buying a home as, obviously it's an investment, but if you're willing to put in a little bit of work, you can really see your investment grow over a short period of time. It's just, getting over that hurdle of kind of, doing these little bit of renovations. And so, which actually brings me into another question I've had.
Sure.
Maybe I can answer this, but I've had a client who's been sitting on the fence for a long time, who was kind of torn between buying a new home or renovating their existing home. And so they had, like a 3 bedroom, 2 bath home, and their family's growing. And so they got some bids to renovate it to put at least another bedroom. I think it was like two and another bathroom. So they were going to have like a 5 bedroom, 3 bath home at the end of it. And I, I'm I'm going to be completely honest. I'm skeptical about that situation because when you the market likes to have conformity. So in a neighborhood, they like to see all the homes to be generally the same size and condition. So what tends to happen on those remodels, because they're so expensive, is that you're spending upwards. I think this remodel is going to be probably hovering around 300 grand to kind
Wow.
of blow. Yeah, at least it was mid twos at best,
It's still a lot.
and 300. And so the home was worth like 525 around there. And so, given that the neighborhood is filled with these 3 bedroom, two bath kind of starter homes in a great neighborhood in Cascade Park, I, I don't think you're going to see your investment back when you sell. So, if you're looking to remodel to get yourself some space because you have to be there, you love the neighborhood, you love the school, it works for you. Everybody's situation is different. Maybe that's something you do, but the math on that really is tough to reconcile, because it's hard when you have an outlier in a neighborhood. So the neighborhood's all sort of 3, maybe 4 bedrooms, and you have this like giant 5 bedroom or 6 bedroom home that you've remodeled. It's really hard to sell that because it sticks out. The price is going to be so much higher than other homes in the neighborhood, and I'm not sure you're going to get the investment back. So there are a lot of home improvements you can make to raise the value of your home. Obviously, beds and kitchens and baths often return your investment back, but it's often not at a 100% rate. There's a couple of things that do, statistically, according to the National Association of Realtors, do have a 100% rate of return, and it's flooring, a garage door, and like some exterior improvements. So, different siding or different kinds of facades can bring back 100% of your money back when you go
To
to
sell.
sell. Yes. But overall, I know that people are considering this renovation versus new buy situation. And this might sound biased because I help people buy and sell homes. But my first question is, can you keep your home, your current home, and buy another
Yeah.
home? That's always which sounds weird, but anytime somebody wants to sell, I'm like, can you keep it? Because I do believe in the power of holding on to the assets over time. And obviously there's some times when people need to sell, but my first question would be like, how can we keep that and get you into a home that you're going to really enjoy? So,
Which would be a really wise, investment move if you can make it, if it's feasible,
if you can make it happen, and I do think because a lot of times, like as you mentioned, you don't need the 20% down. Sometimes you might need a large chunk of money to make the math work. But my first question is always going to be like, can you keep your home and get the new home that you want? Not everybody can do it, but I think more people can do it than they think, because there's a lot of options getting that money. There's locks, there's cash out refinances. Again, you'd have to run the numbers.
Or just a simple 5% down for
Right.
for a non first time home buyer. That is the minimum down. And we do this for clients all the time, and it's not necessarily permanent. So as a real estate agent, I'm sure you'll confirm, have a non contingent offer, meaning you don't have to sell a house to buy another house, is always going to give you a competitive edge to get the offer accepted. Talk to a lender, figure out what your options are for affordability. And it's not permanent. If 6 months down the road you determine, I just don't want to be a landlord, okay, sell your house. Make sure that the loan program and the lender you're working with is going to service the loan and maybe offers what's called a recast. It's a zero fee for most lenders. I know Guild doesn't charge for it, where you can permanently lower your mortgage payment on the new home you've just purchased from proceeds of your sale after you close. So that there's tons of creative finance solutions